The next speaker that we have is Meaghan Weatherdon. Am I right in saying that? Is a PhD candidate in a collaborative program with the Department for the Study of Religion and the Department of Environmental Studies at the University of Toronto. Her research addresses how Indigenous and non-Indigenous youth engage in and commemorate walking the land as a way to foster healing and build a resilience, as well as to negotiate competing demands for resistance and reconciliation in the colonial Canada. So from one story of settler colonialism to another, the title of this talk is Walking the Law, Asserting Indigenous Jurisdiction Throughout the Journey of Nishiiyuu.
And before I begin, I also want to take a moment just to acknowledge that we are gathered here on lands that have been and continue to be home to a diversity of Indigenous nations, including the Wendat, Seneca, Haudenosaunee, and the Mississauga New Credit, and that the City of Toronto is home to a diversity of Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. So today my paper is entitled Walking the Law, Asserting Indigenous Jurisdiction Throughout the Journey of Nishiiyuu. And so I'll begin. The Journey of Nishiiyuu was a social movement in which a group of Cree youth from Ouamax, Quebec traveled 1,600 kilometers by foot to Parliament Hill in Ottawa, Ontario during the winter of 2013. And just to provide a little bit of context, Ouamax is the furthest north of the Cree communities in the James Bay region. It's right where the Cree territory of Nishiiyuu meets the Inuit territory in Nunavik. And so it's right under the 55th parallel in the subarctic, and it's a fly-in community. So this is just to say they walked quite a while. In certain regards, the Journey of Nishiiyuu can be considered as a contestation to the colonial, spatial, and political reorganization of Nishiiyuu brought on by the JB and QA. For one, the walkers physically traveled across, camped in, hunted in, held ceremonies in Category 2 and 3 lands, both physically and symbolically reoccupying lands that had been taken away in the James Bay Agreement. The journey is just one of many examples of how the Cree continue to exercise jurisdiction over their territories by walking, occupying, and restoring their lands. Significantly, however, the laws of their ancestors resist such categorical and geographic containment. These laws move with the walkers as they enter other spaces of engagement. In their study of the challenges legal pluralism posed to British rule in India, Renisi Mawani and Isa Hussain remark, quote, "Law and legal institutions have largely been conceived as territorially and geographically bound, as coterminous with the political sovereignty of empires and states." End quote. Yet law does move across both space and time. For instance, Laura Benton has elucidated the itinerant nature of law when she explains how legal cultures traveled with imperial officials, merchants, sailors, soldiers, sojourners, settlers, captives, and even pirates, agents in empire who position themselves as subjects and often as representatives as distant sovereigns. End quote. In their travels, these agents of empire extended the reach of imperial law. Yet as they traversed the New World, they were not moving across lawless lands, whether knowingly or unwittingly, they were entering complex and plural Indigenous legal orders. Imperial officials of the early colonial era had to engage with these legal understandings and practices as they negotiated treaties, trade relations, and secured alliances with different Indigenous nations during times of war. In James Bay Cree territory, for example, Hudson Bay officials abided to a variety of Cree protocols, such as gifting, holding feasts, participating in pipe ceremonies, and much to their dismay, providing extensions of credit to secure trade relations with their Cree partners. However, although colonial settlers made claims to the lands in the Americas through various ceremonies of possession, and by reasoning that relied heavily on religious ideologies, as Pamela Clausen explains, quote, "Colonial understandings of Indigenous spiritual jurisdiction Ways of speaking the law, rooted in sacred authority, derived from a relationship to land and space, were often unenlightened, mistaken, or willfully uncomprehending.